Welcome back to Ask a Dad. Today's terrible idea is installing your own patio. You're going to save a ton in labor, but trick your friends into coming over and help you if you can. So I wanted to show you some of the materials that go into this. We are building a flagstone patio. So we've chosen a natural stone versus a manufactured one. Benefits of each: the manufactured one is so much easier to lay because the thicknesses are consistent and the shapes are similar, so it's easier to get a pattern going. But for this cabin we wanted a more rustic look, so we went with a mined natural rock. These are mountain bluestones out of Oklahoma. They're not horribly expensive. This patio is about 6 by 20. And from a material standpoint, we're going to have the whole thing in for about $500. So I want to show you just some of the steps since I'm about halfway through here. The first thing is I want to show you the base layer. You have options. Traditionally, people have gone with sand, but now you can get this. Your rock place will call it screenings. What it is a ground up limestone. And the reason ground up limestone is better than sand is that it will harden once it gets some rain and moisture and settles. It'll form a more solid base, and you won't track it in the way you would like sand. Sand is okay, but if you can find screenings, it's a lot better option. So shoveled the area pretty flat, then came back and laid screenings, reeded it with a 2x4, and then the pit bull walked all through it like that, and then I cleared out all the hoof prints there from him. So you want to get it generally flat. You want to pay attention to your grade because you got to consider drainage. This is the high end over here, and everything's going to drain that way. So your initial base level, make sure you're thinking about that, and then as you level each stone, you need to keep that in consideration. All right, so we've talked about the base. We've talked about the natural flagstone that we're using. Essentially, it's a pretty simple process. I've got a combination of levels here where you go rock by rock, and you want to get this like a 4-foot level at least, and make sure that you're continuing that pretty smooth transition from rock to rock so that somebody doesn't catch their foot on it. And also you want to make sure that, we're draining with this as the high side. Make sure the bubble's over here so that everything will drain downhill. But essentially it's a pretty simple process. You're just putting the level, checking it multiple ways against all of its neighbors. And you'll see that I'm about a 1/4 inch low on this side. So what you do is just bring in more base, build this up, and then try it again and make sure you're level. And another thing to pay attention to, this is a good example, because these are a mined rock and not manufactured, you get different levels on the bottom. So you've got flat base here, but you realize you got some low spots that you've got to fill in with sand to get this rock pretty stable when it's resting. So you just kind of move them back and forth, left to right, get them as stable, check them against all the rocks, and get them all level. And then last thing that you'll do is you've got to do a filler between the rocks. So a lot of people will do a small pebble. The smaller the rock, like gravel or pea gravel, is a good option because it gets down in all the cracks and holds it tight. But they also make this, it's called polymetric sand. And polymetric sand is great because it's almost like a mortar. So once you sprinkle it into the joints, you add water to it and it sets up and hardens. It looks very natural like sand does, but it'll actually give you a firm base between the rocks, so you've got more stability long term. So you water in the polymetric sand, and that'll be the end of it. All right, we're at the final step now of putting in the flagstone this weekend. I've added the polymetric sand, and the one thing I wanted to show is, think of it like when you're grouting tile. You got to clean it off, and it's supposed to be recessed about 1/8 of an inch, so you want to fill it because that holds everything in place like mortar, and kind of smooths out transitions between the stones. But just make sure that you've cleaned off your pavers, because otherwise it'll stick to that when you water it in. So next step is we will water this whole thing in and let it settle, and we'll be done.